Hello, everybody. This is Megan,
And this is Alana.
and welcome to Tea Time Crimes.
Hi. I'm wearing your favorite outfit.
I thought you were going to come in loud, and then you surprised me with that tiny little baby high. What, you wearing my favorite outfit? What's my favorite outfit?
It's one of the
Oh!
Gma 90s.
Your grandma 90s.
Yeah.
Alana has a collection.
No,
of
I have
19
two. One from
No.
each grandma.
It seems like all the time. Didn't I
Well,
give you one?
No, that's the. You gave me a proper 90.
Well, either way, 1950s grandma.
Yeah, I put it on after I shower before I change into clothes.
They're awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're great.
Well,
Well,
I'm treating you today.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, and I love what I'm seeing. I wish y'all could see it.
You will not be getting a picture.
Well, we're getting ready for another episode because we're going to take a break for a little
Bye.
bit. I've got a lot going on, and I just can't research
Sounds
for
ominous.
a minute. What's that?
Sounds ominous.
I know. No, we're just moving, and
There
right
you go.
now I'm in the studio, and it looks like the Grinch stole Christmas in
It
here.
does. Everything's got. There's bare
Yeah.
shelves behind her. Usually, it's a bunch of football stuff, and then our little Tea Time Crime sign.
Yeah, it's bare walls and nails, and I'm expecting Cindy Lou Who at any moment to say, "Why, Santa Claus? Why?" It's very depressing, but we're moving for a bit, so I've got a lot on my
Yeah.
plate, plus working full time, plus
Yeah.
a bunch of other stuff.
All of the
and
things.
Plus, I had strep back to back, by the way.
Yeah, that
I know I
was
mentioned
fun.
it in one episode, but I had it twice.
We also recorded out of order, and yeah, she was just sick for I feel like
For a
2 months
month.
straight.
Yeah, it was stupid. Anyway, but hopefully it'll just be for a couple weeks, and then we'll be back ready to go. If it's going to go longer than that, we'll try to do
We'll
something
let
fun.
you know.
Yeah,
Oh, look at us peeking down a little bit. Calm down, night
showing some cleavage there, Grandma.
I know.
But let's try to go out with a bang then, since I'm going to miss not recording with you for 2 weeks.
I know. It's gonna be depressing.
First off, tell me about this ridiculous retreat that you went on.
Yeah. So everybody knows a part of the Mattress Club. Just kidding. That's what we've been calling it. It's the Master Naturalist program of Southeast Louisiana.
She said it wrong one day.
And we go to different nature spots all over Southeast Louisiana and we learn about stuff. Excuse me. And this one was a big one because we went to a place called Grand Isle, which always gets blown off the map every hurricane, but they keep rebuilding. But it's 2 hours and change away from New Orleans. So we stay over there because we do 2 days. So it was great. It was a blast. I learned a ton. It's great to be around those kind of people. You just learn a lot from them. But we did have to share a room.
What? Yeah. Why don't you set up the horror of the trip? That would have been my undoing.
I mean, it was fine. So I get there and I want to drop my stuff off in my room. Turns
Science
out,
pants need to be hung up. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I think I'm already wearing my science pants at this point.
Oh, perfect.
And I walk into the room and there are 4 bunk beds and 2 mattresses on the floor.
Oh. How many people were on this entire retreat?
I think the group is about 20 people.
That's something you warn a person about.
I did miss the one right before this, so they could have talked about it, and I missed that. But luckily, I have a lot of camp experience, so it wasn't that big of a deal, but it was a little surprise. And then I did not pack properly because they kept that bunker at 50 degrees, and I was just freezing, tossing and turning, waking up every few hours.
Oh, you were freezing? I thought you were hot.
No, I was so cold because they had the AC cranked, and I only brought a warm sheet.
I hope
So-
you didn't bring that grandma nightie.
I did not.
Thank goodness. That's an email, though. That's a follow-up email. Hey, just want to make sure everybody knows that
Yeah.
they are sharing this room with 7 other strangers.
Yeah. But it worked out.
Were you on the floor or on the bunk?
No, I was on the bunk. I I didn't get there early enough to get a bottom bunk, so I got a top bunk, but at least I wasn't on the mattress on the floor.
I might have preferred the mattress on the floor unless it was
Maybe.
looked like a crime scene.
No, they were fine mattresses.
I would have turned right around.
But I did see some dolphins in the morning. We saw lots of crabs. It was a joy. It's lots of birding. Lots of rare birds because it's migration season and they touch down there. So
you're gonna have to have bigger ticket items for me to share a room with that many strangers. Other than a couple
John
of crabs.
Goodman?
Yes. John Goodman, B.
That's
Arthur,
her celebrity
Betty
crush.
White. Like they come back, I'm there. Some sort of
That would be amazing.
I know.
Yeah, you would definitely sleep in a bunk if you got to meet that group.
Yeah, then I would. Otherwise, to see a couple of crabs, I'm all set. I'm all set. Oh, all right. I'm glad you survived it. Of course, I'm also thinking it's unsafe, and I was like, well, nice knowing you.
Oh, right. Yeah, I did set it up in a little scary way.
Yeah, because you don't really know these folks.
Yeah, but it's fine. I mean, I've met them a few weekends.
Yeah, well, you know who else had met people? Jolly Jane's patients.
True.
You know what I mean? She'd worked with them for weeks, and they loved her, and then they didn't wake up. So I was nervous for you.
I survived. I'm here. I'm a little sunburnt, but, my brain is that much more rich.
All right, get into your tea, madam.
Okay. Today, we have Iron Goddess.
Ooh.
So it's it's from the same company, from the Evening in Mississauga, which one of our listeners sent to me.
Oh, yeah.
Or I ordered, I never forget. And it's in the resilience. Like they group their teas and it's in the resilience group.
Oh.
And it's really it's very pure Chinese oolong tea. So oolong is before it gets very more produced than black tea. It's a bunch of little balls and then they unfurl as you heat them up.
Gross image, but okay.
It smells like tea. I just love the name, right? Iron Goddess. Can I be that?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm all in for that name.
It smells very it's pure, beautiful oolong tea. Oh, yes. It reaches into your tongue and drills in a nice way. It pours in and brings you to life.
Like high tide filling the holes in the beach.
Exactly. That's exactly it. That's exactly what I was thinking of. But it's iron and it's making me strong. There is it's a very slight body. Oolong is not known for its body, but
rude.
It's enriching my soul.
It's known for its brain. Okay.
That's so good. What do I want to give it though? A bolstering thumbs up.
I like it. Would I like it?
I think you would. Well, but I don't put any milk in it. Do you like some herbals, right?
Nope. Adding milk.
Okay. So no.
So no, I wouldn't like it.
You wouldn't like it. Because
what if I added milk to it?
It would just there's a beautiful, delicate flavor once the water fills the holes, and you'd miss it.
So you can't add milk, just not in front of you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, but you'd be ruining it for yourself.
I want to do it in front of you, just for fun. Okay, well, let's get into this case. I'm pretty interested in this case because it's kind of a part 2. From last week.
Okay, you did say you wanted to keep these two together, so I was interested on why.
Yeah, I did say we need to keep them together. They're sister episodes. So we talked about Martha Place last week. If you haven't listened, you don't need to go back and listen
now.
But maybe just do it. I mentioned very briefly before Sarah Winchester interrupts us, who is our resident ghost. Oh. There she is. Hi, Sarah. That Martha Place was the first woman electrocuted.
Yes.
By the death penalty, but there were 2 other women before her who had the sentence. But she was the first one. We covered one, Lizzie Halliday. So I went back and I was like, I want to look into this other woman. Her name is Maria Barbella. Although
Barbella,
exactly, but everybody calls her they say her last name wrong. So in all of the newspapers, she's known as
Barbell.
No, no, not Barbell. Maria Barbary.
Barbary? I feel like they're making it harder.
They really did. I was like, Barbella is so much easier.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. I thought the same thing. I thought, they probably dropped some of the letters.
Like Barb.
Yeah, but nope. It is Barbary. So anyway, I might refer to both names, but her mother said that Barbella is correct. So there we go.
Okay. And this is in New York, right?
Yes, it's in New York. Yeah.
Walking here.
All right, ready? I'm going to present this to you as I discovered it too. So not perfectly chronologically, because as I was digging into stuff, I kept asking questions like, that doesn't make sense. Where are they getting that information? And so I had to find other sources and then uncovered some stuff that was really surprising.
Ooh, cool.
So April 26, 1895, Maria Barbella walked up to her lover, Dominico Cataldo, and slit his throat from ear to ear, nearly decapitating him because he refused to marry her.
Get it, girl. What kind of knife is that?
Okay, don't cheer on the murderers.
We don't murder here at Tea Time Crimes, folks.
We're
to the staunchly against it.
Yes, absolutely
wink,
against it. Don't wink.
No, wink.
We're against it, but let's listen to the story unfold, okay? Because that seems pretty cut and dry, or cut and bloody.
Barbaric, some might say.
At this time, Italian immigrants like Maria's family are facing a lot of discrimination.
It's pretty
which is unbelievably evident in the papers.
Oh, God.
Literally every sentence about it starts like this. Maria Barberi, an Italian, was accused every single sentence in every single paper. They have to say everything all the time. It's also a time when a man's promise to marry a woman is
really matters.
It's for keeps. Yeah.
It really matters.
You could potentially file a lawsuit about somebody for a verbal contract. It is a whole old world that we've heard about from time to time. So Maria is, of course, arrested because she did it in the middle of the day. And the Fall River Daily Evening News, by the way of the New York Sun, writes, "It was a typical Italian murder.
Wow.
Planned and carried out with the cool, calculating desperation of the vendetta.
Wow.
And the girl is now in custody of the police and fully realizing the consequences of her crime, shows no remorse."
Damn.
Yeah. Now, we know a woman's reputation is absolutely everything in this time. Oh, my gosh. Ugh. To an absurd, just stupid degree. And Maria very calmly and matter-of-factly states that by breaking his promise of marriage, Cataldo had ruined her. She's like, that's it. I don't understand why nobody's understanding this. It's pretty simple. Like, he promised to marry me and he's ruined me. I need him to marry me. So now Maria met Dominico Cataldo while she was living with her parents and her 5 siblings in a tenement house at 163 Mott Street. Her father was a tailor. The family had come from Italy separately. So first her brother came, then 2 of her other siblings, and then she came with her parents. And now they're all over there together.
Got it.
And as we know from many stories before us, the tenement houses were rough living conditions.
Mm-hmm.
These are several story buildings with 1 to 3 rooms, maybe if you're lucky, around 300 to 400 square feet for an entire family.
Right.
They're cramped, which is bad enough, but
they light on fire all the time.
That also leads to unsanitary conditions and limited access to fresh water. They're also unsafe. If a fire or anything like that broke out, there was usually
many stories about
not a way to get out because there weren't enough windows or there wasn't access to a fire escape.
I wonder where
or the
fire escape was created.
In the summer, the heat was so unbearable that tenants would often sleep outside on the roof or the sidewalk.
Yikes.
Yeah, I know. It makes your bunk bed situation seem like a luxury.
Yeah, they probably would have loved it.
Outhouses were the only bathroom, and the streets outside the buildings were covered in waste.
Don't say it.
Sorry. And it wasn't until 1901, which is a few years after Maria's arrest, that the Tenement House Act of 1901 was adopted. And this required outhouses to get gone and basic
indoor plumbing
to be installed. But what ended up happening was that landlords either started raising the rent or evicting people. And it wasn't exactly the...
not a great solution.
What everyone was hoping for, yeah.
Got it.
That's for another day. So Maria and her family of, 8 people are in one of these little apartments. Coming from Italy, I don't know what kind of house they lived in, but it was probably more likely that even if they were used to a small living space, they were outside for most of their activities. So they would eat outside, they would work outside, they would visit outside. They wouldn't be stuck in this little apartment. And coming to New York, it would have been a bit of a shock for them because they were either working from home all day in this tiny apartment or they were working in a small factory or maybe a big factory, but a cramped factory all day and then walking home to this little apartment.
Yeah, not fun.
So it would have been a bit of an adjustment. Maria, in fact, worked as a seamstress in a cloak factory on Broadway and held various seamstress jobs since her arrival in the U.S. at the age of 20. She worked nonstop. About a year into her New York life, Cataldo took notice of her and introduced himself. Cataldo was employed as what they called a boot black, which I think is he shined boots or fixed boots. Okay. He did something with shoes. And he told Maria that at that point in his life, he was looking for a wife.
Oh, boy.
And he'd been saving to open up his own barber shop and had about $1,000 already saved up in the bank.
Good for him.
Well, I think you'll feel differently. Maria and Cataldo began meeting kind of after work. He would wait to walk her home. Mrs. Barbella noticed, and when she questioned her daughter about it, Maria told them the truth. She's like, oh yeah, he wants to marry me. You know, we're walking together on the street, so.
Did he say that, though?
He did say that.
Okay, because he said he's looking for a wife.
Right. This went on for a while. He would talk to her on the street a lot. This went back and forth. So her parents are concerned about this man's intentions, and Mr. Barbella is not impressed and did not think Cataldo was actually interested in marrying his daughter. So they said, cool it and stop meeting with this man, right?
Oh, it's going to make it even worse.
Mm-hmm.
Secret lovers.
Well, not really. They put a stop to it, and Maria's kind of okay. But then Cataldo's pretty persistent.
Oh.
And he ends up seeing her again, and they kind of start talking and walking again. And then one day, Maria just up and leaves home to go with Cataldo to 424th East 13th Street to live with him.
Whoa, that's a big step.
She quits her job, making her totally dependent on him.
What?
And Cataldo says, it's just a matter of paperwork. We're basically married. We're going to get married, tomorrow.
That doesn't work.
A month passed and no wedding.
Yeah.
Maria and her mother are now begging Cataldo to follow through with his promise. Okay, this is a time period again where Mrs. Barbella is not taking the stance of come home, this guy's a liar. She is instead begging Cataldo to marry her daughter because as far as she's concerned, she's already moved out and this is her only chance at redemption.
I mean, she might not be wrong.
She wants Cataldo to make an honest woman of Maria.
Yeah. I mean, I get that as a mom.
Sure. Apparently, it was at this point that Cataldo just stopped any semblance of a facade and told the truth, that he was not going to marry Maria. Maria is devastated.
Have they been confabulating?
She doesn't feel, I'm not ignoring you, but we're going to get into it. Okay. She doesn't feel she can go home because she's ashamed, and she doesn't think her father will allow it.
Oh, no.
She's really in a rough spot. So just like her mother, she thinks her absolute only solution is to marry this man.
Yeah.
But things between them, this is not
devolving
whirlwind romance, okay?
Okay.
The day before the murder, Cataldo came home and laid a razor down on the table. And this is a time when they're not using Gillettes and Bics. This is one of those real razors.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
The long ones with the...
Yeah, yep. Serious. The ones that could, some foreshadowing here, nearly decapitate a man. And he told Maria, I might use that on you if you aren't careful.
Whoa.
And it's believed that at this point, Cataldo was abusing Maria regularly. Maria begged him to marry her again. And she, again, thinks this is the only solution. Even her mother, who knows that Maria is being abused, is still trying to get this man to marry her daughter. And he just refuses. So the next day, on April 26th, Maria asked Cataldo again. Then he beat her. Mrs. Barbella came to her daughter's side and said, listen, we'll go talk to him together. We'll show him reason.
No, bring your dad.
Maria told her mother she would convince Cataldo.
She's not going
who's at the saloon, by the way, on a Tuesday. So, I don't know.
Great.
I mean, maybe that's just his day off, but newspaper accounts vary on what happened next. So a conversation occurred with Mrs. Barbella, Maria, and Cataldo, but some say it happened before he left the apartment and others say it happened down at the saloon.
Okay.
Either way, he's quoted as saying, "What do I want to marry her for? I can get plenty of other girls when I want them.
Ew.
Pigs marry. I don't." Which I don't
First
even
of all,
understand.
what?
Pigs marry? I don't even know what that means. "If you want my money, you can have it, but you can't tie yourself to me. I'm beginning to get tired of your everlasting crying, so you can just as well stop it. I'll never marry you." Okay, so that said, whether that was before he left or at the saloon, I'm not sure, but Maria ends up at Mancuso's Saloon on 428th East 13th Street, so it's just right near their apartment. She interrupts Cataldo's card game one last time, asks him to marry her. He, of course, says no. He says, "You're ruined anyway. Why would I want to?" And that, I'm paraphrasing, but he implies that.
Ew. I hate
Maria
this guy.
doesn't say another word, and with one quick movement, slices his neck with the same razor he'd laid out the night before.
In front of all the card players?
Yeah. The razor flew across the room. Maria just stood there quietly. Cataldo ran out of the door holding his neck. He's bleeding profusely. He only made it to a curb where he fell in the street and died.
Okay.
Maria, with what's described as very little urgency, washes her hands in a bucket of water and then heads back to the apartment that she shared with Cataldo, changed out of her bloodstained clothes, and just sat quietly and waited for the police.
Wow.
She goes quietly and calmly because they get there real quick. And she tells her lawyer, "I have no tears left."
Yeah.
She's just kind of
She made her own choice, I guess, you know?
blank.
She took control of her life.
She completely confesses to the murder. Her only show of emotion is when asked about her mother, and she is very clear that she alone committed the crime, and her mother had nothing to do with it. Maria gave her statement in Italian, but she does speak a little bit of English, and she was speaking to reporters in English, and she basically tells them, I'm paraphrasing, "I was a good girl until he came along. I told him to marry me or I'd kill him. He refused. I would have killed him last night, but I didn't want to get blood in the bed, so here we are." That's basically what she said, which is coming across pretty ruthless.
Yeah.
Maria's trial started in July, and Assistant District Attorneys Alfred Latterbach and Mr. McIntyre were trying the case for the state of New York. Maria is defended by Mr. Evans and appears in court with a Mrs. Foster, who's the prison matron, and they refer to her as the Tombs Angel, which, if you remember, the prison in the city is called the Tombs because it looks like Egyptian tombs. And so Mrs. Foster is known as the Tombs Angel. Very nice lady.
Do you think I'd be a good prison matron?
I don't know.
It's a tough one.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that job's for you.
Okay. I'll pass on that application.
Let's not find out. The prosecution's case is pretty straightforward, right? They're like, Maria confessed. She explained why she did it. Witnesses saw her do it.
Yeah.
Like, what else do you need from us?
Right.
We already know that the motive is Cataldo refused to marry her, but it's alleged during the trial that he also took money from her. You remember he said he had that $1,000 saved up?
Yes.
The papers off and on report that he actually only had $400 and then he took $400 from Maria and put it together.
Jeez.
So one of the conditions of her agreeing to marry him was that he would give her back the money, which I don't think this turns out to be accurate or true, but it was a theory that was floating around for a while, which adds another layer to it.
But remember, he said, he's like, "I'll give you the money, but I don't want to be tied to you." So I wonder.
And so that's why, well, we'll get into it a little bit because
Okay.
Maria does some more talking. To start, the prosecution calls Officer James Hayes, who's the first person on the scene, the first policeman on the scene. And he described finding Cataldo in the street and then basically following a blood trail back to Maria's apartment. He witnessed her throw a small bag out of the window, which he recovered, and he had entered it as evidence. It was completely bloodstained, and upon seeing it, Maria broke down. She's pretty emotional through this whole trial. Yeah, her tears have come back. Luigi Cataldo took the stand as the person who identified Dominico. It's his cousin.
Okay.
The coroner takes the stand. Super straightforward job. He's like, yeah, his throat was cut so deep that his spine was exposed from the front.
Wow. It's impressive.
So, That's
it's not
cause
great,
of death.
but
Thomas Callahan was called as a witness, not because he knew the couple or even witnessed anything, but he actually recovered the murder weapon. He found it on the street because Maria had tossed it as she was running home. Or what I'm imagining is just walking home.
Yeah.
I don't feel like she ran. Now, because Maria's first language is Italian, she's been permitted a translator for her confession at a station. Officer O'Rourke was the one who took her statement in Italian. Maria's lawyer, Mr. Evans, stopped the examination right as it was beginning. He said, hold on, how do we know this guy speaks Italian? And he quizzed him. I really like Maria's lawyer. He quizzed him and he gave him an Italian newspaper. He said, read this to me and translate it to me. I want to make sure that you actually can speak Italian.
Good idea.
He could. So it continued. But Mr. Evans continued to push because O'Rourke was relaying the testimony in English, obviously, because the jury doesn't speak Italian. And Mr. Evans stopped and he said, hey, we need to record this in Italian. The stenographer does not speak Italian. So as Officer O'Rourke started first relaying it in Italian and then translating, the stenographer just sat there. And Mr. Evans stopped the trial again and said, listen, Maria could die for this. She deserves to have her exact words recorded.
I see.
So O'Rourke,
they need another person to type it.
Here's what they did. O'Rourke had to say each Italian syllable, and the stenographer wrote it out phonetically.
No, that
must have taken
nightmare.
Forever. Yes.
Nobody could type Italian? Jesus.
I know, right? The last witness called was a reporter that Maria had spoken to, an Italian reporter, and he basically just said everything that Officer O'Rourke had said. She said the same thing. Now, before Mr. Evans began his defense, he attempted to have the charge changed from first-degree murder because he wants death penalty off the table, if at all possible. But that motion was denied.
Dang.
The next day, more of Maria's story comes out. The press seems to have quite a bit of sympathy at the start. They start calling her Little Maria, and she's described in pretty soft adjectives, even though this crime is really brutal.
Brutal.
Yeah, the World Evening Edition writes, the guilt of Maria, as shown by the testimony yesterday, is clearly established. Yet the case is sad and pitiful, and the poor little defendant is weak and frightened. Yeah, the perception of Maria is all over the place. But I'm noticing you have more sympathy for Maria than Martha at the start already. But this is just as obvious, if not more so, because she did it and everyone saw. Yeah. So what is it that's making you more sympathetic to start with the information you know?
I don't know. I just feel really bad for her. More than Martha, I guess. It's just like he seems like such an asshole.
Yeah, you're going to really hate him in a minute.
Oh, no.
The article even goes on to illustrate a scene when Maria stops to talk to two mothers in the courtroom who were, on the docket for the day, and they had their children with them. They were on for very petty crimes. The way they describe it is so over the top, I had to read it to you. One of the babies was a sunny-haired, dimpled, jolly, fat little piece of humanity. When the girl who was on trial for her life stopped before the mother, the baby patted Maria's cheek and dug his tiny fingers into her eyes. For the first time since the trial began, the girl smiled.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Also, what's that baby doing? Gouging her eyes out.
I know. Relax.
I know. I read that 4 times. I'm like, are we sure? That's cute. That afternoon, Maria took the stand. There's very little mystery again. She's like, yeah, I did it, and here's why I did it. She's very clear from the start. But she starts to add more color to the relationship. According to Maria, Cataldo had promised they would be married right away. Then he attempted to get her to open what she called disorderly house, which I think is a brothel. She passed it off as a bad joke and didn't pay it any more attention. Then she brought up marriage again. Cataldo was like, no, I'm not going to marry you. Instead, he said he would tell people she was his sister, get someone else to marry her, and then they could still confabulate whenever he wanted to.
Oh, that's nice.
Mm-hmm. One interesting point about this testimony is Maria is giving this in Italian. She's crying so much that they have to break frequently, and then her words are being shouted kind of matter-of-factly by an interpreter.
Okay.
So I can only imagine it's this really disjointed, odd scene where like Maria's emotions probably aren't hitting right because the jury has to wait to hear what she's saying. Right. She's falling to pieces. I'm sure the interpreter's like, and then he went to, I'm sure they're not But I mean, maybe they were amazing. You know, like the sign language interpreters, they're unbelievable. But
the
maybe,
best.
so maybe that's unfair. But the morning of the murder, we've already heard about it. He beat her, went to the saloon, playing cards. She followed him. She described that moment as being so furious she could not think straight. She told the court, I was crazed with anger at his refusals and answers to my pleadings, and I was in such a dreadful passion that the deed was done before I knew it. She was cross-examined. And after this, this is where I started to ask more questions, because this is all the papers said. They just recounted Maria's point up until I did, and then they put these little blurbs from the prosecution about their cross-examination that asked Maria exclusively about Cataldo drugging her soda one day. She said it made her confused and dizzy, and she ended up in a house with him.
No.
She ended it by saying, I was not in my right mind, and I trusted him.
No.
So that's all they say. There's no more information. I was like, wait, hold on. This is very different than a courtship that went on for months and a woman who just decided to go live with him under promises of marriage. What aren't they telling us? And the newspapers would not print it anywhere. So I did some digging. Another paper said that on March 28th, so that's a month before the murder, that Maria said Cataldo had assaulted her in a home other than her own and then induced her to live with him. That was the most information I could get. And so
that makes more sense.
Yes, it makes way more sense. But the newspapers, this is all they're printing about it.
God.
And I was trying to understand. I'm like, assaulted her in another home? Like, I assume they mean rape, but did he just hit her? Because we've talked about not just hit her, but did he hit her? Because we know that he's beating her at other points. What does induce mean? The only way that word is used in current day is to induce labor. Like, did he force her to go live with him? Did he convince her? It's all very mysterious because they don't want to be improper. Which is so frustrating.
I bet he sexually assaulted her and she's like, well, now I can't go home. I'm ruined. I'm going to move in with you.
Which is a much different story, right?
Yep.
Anyway, besides Maria, there was very little for the defense to do. They weren't really questioning anything. She admitted that she did it. They basically just bring up character witnesses after that.
Okay.
And the New York Tribune summed it up in one sentence. Quote, several Italians then testified that the prisoner had borne a good reputation among our country people. That's it. Doesn't actually say what anybody said.
Beautiful. Hey, she's thoughtful enough not to get the bed sheets bloody. What about that?
They did not mention that. Maria's lawyer, Mr. Evans, closed by painting a picture of Maria as a hardworking woman who had no issues until she met Cataldo.
There we go.
She'd then been treated poorly and her temper got the best of her.
And also, she's been
what he's going for.
I don't know. There's a little bit of a revenge here that I can't say I don't understand.
Yeah. This is the first trial, right? Side note, between the resting of the trial and the verdict, Maria's family was also about to be evicted for not being able to make rent. And it said that the ADA, Mr. McIntyre, paid for the family's rent so that they wouldn't be evicted.
Wow.
Which, if that is true, that's unbelievably kind.
Yeah.
Before the jury was sent away to decide Maria's fate, the judge, apparently, I couldn't find the speech, but he apparently gave a pretty prejudiced speech against Maria.
Okay.
He did explain to them, if you have reasonable doubt, you have to listen. If you think that she went there with the intent to kill, then that's first-degree murder. But it was said in the papers that Mr. Evans just kept objecting to the judge's final statement because it was painting Maria in such a bad light. He ended his statement by saying, the law does not hold women less responsible than men. The female sex is sometimes used as a cloud for most horrible crimes.
True.
Right. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes and then returned a verdict of guilty of murder in the first degree on Monday, July 15th. A few days later, Maria was sentenced to death on August 19th and ordered to be sent to Sing Sing. Mr. Evans, of course, moved for an appeal right away. Besides her legal team, Maria, unlike Martha, had a ton of public support as well. I'm willing to bet they understood the lines between the papers, or they had heard word on the street about what really happened, or they had gone to the trial. And petitions are being signed and sent to the governor asking for clemency or full pardons. And I'm talking like thousands of people are doing this.
Wow.
Yeah. Suffragist Mary Livermore was outspoken in favor of a pardon for Maria. She was adamant that a jury of Maria's peers should have overseen the trial. And she made a point of saying, I'm talking mature women, not little girls. She didn't say it quite like that, but she was saying, give me women who have lived and know what's up, and you might have a different outcome. She told the Boston Post, a man shoots down his wife's paramour, and though a form of arrest and trial is gone through with, it is but a form, for the man is acquitted and the public says it is right. Which we've seen. Remember that case we covered before about Sickles? She even goes so far as to say if she had been in Maria's shoes, she would have done the same thing, which people go wild for. Thousands of people are backing her up, but you also have people on the other side saying, hey, we can't treat women differently.
Yeah.
If she murdered him, right, and a man would be put to death, which I can understand both accounts. But there's something going on here that we don't yet all fully understand.
Yep.
And people are all over Mary Livermore saying that she was condoning murder and it was too much and she was over the top. And then others are saying that she's right, because if a man can defend their honor or the honor of women, then why wouldn't a woman be able to do that for herself? Because this is a time, remember Kate Southern, kind of the same thing. They were like, you can defend your honor. No, that's fair. Yeah, you can do that. There's also a lot of people who can't wrap their head around putting a woman to death, which we see all the time, especially by electrocution. An article in the Daily Sentinel sums it up pretty solid, I think, for the 1800s. Quote, to think of a woman as vicious, unlovely, coarse, brazen, and rough is to rob them of all their sweet woman-likeness.
Wow.
To unsex them and make them abhorrent to masculine eyes. So I disagree with that part of this argument. I can see the other arguments, right, where Livermore is like, hey, she has the right to defend herself. And the others are like, hey, she committed murder. She should have the same laws as a man. I could see that side, but this little argument sneaks in there. People are writing in asking to take her place.
What?
Yeah, they say, don't put her to death. She can't help it. She's pitiful. I'll do it.
Surprising because she's Italian, too, and all the prejudice against Italians right now.
I also think there's this weird flip side of extra sympathy because she's Italian.
Okay.
In some cases, as much as there is this discrimination and this portrayal that's mostly negative, there are also some people. I saw a lot of letters to the editors, which were fascinating. And some people were saying, hey, she doesn't speak English. She's not used to living here. There was kind of that argument. And then other people were like, this is America. And I was like, wow, we still hear that today.
Right.
So it was this weird, it was working almost both ways.
Interesting.
Yeah. People are also continuing to rip apart Mary Livermore, and they want her to, retract her statement. And she basically is like, I have no notes. I'm good with what I said. So
yes.
Bye. She sounds amazing.
Yeah,
we should cover her someday. And I'm not sure if this is accurate, but at the time, papers start to also report that Maria's age is incorrect. I don't think it was, but it almost seemed to be this wild momentum to save her that they wanted to throw anything they could in the public. But
that's not helpful when you do that.
She's not that old anyway. She's 22 at the time this happened.
Basically a spinster.
But they're saying that she was actually 19 and that the records were wrong and that she's a child. I don't think that that's accurate. I think she was 22. But again, it doesn't really matter. So they're saying she's young, she's Italian, she was brutalized. Men can kill for honor. Why can't women? Men can be put to death. Why can't women? What does it say about a society that will execute women? These are all the themes just floating around. Maria's execution is postponed because she's allowed an appeal. She's allowed a retrial based off her lawyer's insistence that the prosecution submitted improper evidence and that he was not allowed to present all the evidence in her defense. So she's allowed a retrial in the New York Supreme Court, November 16th, 1896.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. By the 18th, the jury was selected, again, 12 men.
Cool. Yeah. Really good selection, y'all.
Don't worry, because the Boston Globe said, there was a good sprinkling of married men with daughters and a number of stout men who are always inclined to be good-tempered.
What?
So don't worry about it. We got a bunch of chubby men on here. I don't know, but these men are hardy. And that means that they're good-tempered, so don't worry, everybody.
Bunch of John Goodmans.
It's just 12 John Goodmans. It's my dream. Sign me up. Opening statements begin with Assistant DA Lauterbach. He's, again, matter of fact. He's like, listen, she said she did it. We know she did it. Here's how it happened, everybody. All pretty much the same witnesses. Officer Hayes, first person on the scene, witnesses from the surrounding stores, other police she confessed to, rinse and repeat. But the defense, which is now Mr. House and Mr. Friend have been added, have made some big adjustments.
Did you just say Mr. House and Mr. Friend?
Uh-huh.
Those sound like fake names.
Well, I think those are their names, either that or my phone auto-corrected it. But I'm pretty sure. They are now claiming Maria had a form of epilepsy that was genetic.
What?
Because remember, epilepsy in the 1800s.
Oh yeah, it's very misdiagnosed and like it's not good.
Yes, they don't understand it at all.
A Looney Tune.
They don't understand it at all. Their first witness was a man named Eligio Lazzolati, who had known Maria's family in Italy. The Standard Union wrote up his testimony as the following. Quote, Maria Barberi's maternal grandfather, Antonio Brosanti, was frequently seized with fits in the streets of town and would attack persons who were passing. He finally became violent and was removed to an asylum for the insane.
Whoa.
So the defense is really trying to lay the groundwork with witnesses that state aunts were insane, uncles were insane, mentally ill, alcoholism, anything they can add to it.
But that's not what happened.
But there's no details or medical testimony that's really given to any of their diagnoses.
Yeah.
The defense is clearly going for an insanity angle, if not an insanity plea, and claims that for generations, Maria's family had suffered from these fits. And this is being taken, you know how they were like, oh, little Maria, she's so sad and pitiful. They're starting to change their view a little bit. The Chicago Tribune writes, all her family shown in the history are tainted with alcoholism or insanity or epilepsy or else are common, inconspicuous peasants.
Wow.
Rude. Being poor is not an illness. Get a life.
Fuckers.
Oh my God. The defense claims that in addition to grandparents, aunts, uncles, Maria's own parents are plagued with headaches and vertigo. That 2 siblings had died in convulsions. And that all of the living children, including Maria, have some form of epilepsy. Maria is said to have seizures since she was a child. Her 14-year-old brother testified to also, they call it fits a lot of times. So I don't know if it's actual epilepsy, but having fits or dizziness, and he showed several scars. They made him shave his head to show all the scars on his head from falling and losing consciousness.
Jeez. I've heard about accounts of people back then like trying to hide it because they don't understand. You get committed to a fucking psych hospital.
I know.
For having epilepsy.
Oh, so sad. On November 25th, Maria took the stand again to tell her side of the story. The Boston Globe is again coming in hot and says, Maria Barberi, her round, ill-featured, unintelligent face, paler than usual, entered the room. Yeah, they are just destroying her and attacking her intelligence in the second trial. Remember, Maria was pretty emotional last time. They had to keep taking a recess. Her testimony takes some time. There are also 6 doctors in the courtroom there to observe her and diagnose her, which I thought, well, can't you not see her on her off time? Because she's been sitting in jail for a minute now. Are you guys too busy?
What have you been up to?
For the record, Maria states that her age is now 24. So that's what she's saying. I'm willing to bet that she was 22 at the time of the murder. She speaks to her grandmother's alcoholism and an uncle who was mean, which I assume means he was abusive.
Yeah.
And he one day set fire to his things and ran through the town naked.
Oh.
So,
it's fun.
I mean, she may have some mental illness in her family. Describing her own condition, Maria said, in FYI, she's learned English while in prison. So she's now giving her own testimony in English.
Good for you.
And the papers are criticizing her for her prison learned English. She can't win.
Okay, this just want to make a point really quick. People who always are like, people who have English as a second language and their English isn't perfect and they're like, they think they're dumb, but it's like Y'all, they know 2 languages.
I know.
Shut the fuck up.
We can't even pretend to speak an accent of another English language. So I don't even, it's just,
it drives me nuts.
Like in her spare time, she perfected another language. Get bent. Anyway.
Get bent.
Maria said, sometimes the bed seems to go around and around. Other times, something seems to jump out of my head and jump all over me. Sometimes I think cats jump out of my head.
Uh-oh.
My head awful bad. One day, the girl say she find me on the floor sleeping and whipping myself right here. And then she kind of pointed to a place on her body. I think what she's describing are dreams, because it seemed that she would have these bad nightmares, and when she'd wake up, it seemed like the room was spinning. It also seems like she may have lost consciousness at some points.
Yeah.
Then Maria started to tell the story of how she met Cataldo. She said she used to pass him on the street and that he would always try to talk to her. She avoided him most of the time. You remember the newspapers were painting this as a courtship.
Yes.
And a woman who ran away kind of in the throes of passion, waiting for... Yeah, we're going to get a very different story now, which is ironically the story she told the first time, but it wasn't recorded that way. She avoided him most of the time. And then somebody said Cataldo was a good guy and marriage would be good for her and him. So she started talking to him on the street. Cataldo said he wanted to ask her parents about marrying her, and she agreed as long as he spoke to her parents first. But Cataldo wouldn't follow through. So Maria started going another way to work to avoid him.
Wow.
He started waiting for her on the new route instead.
Oh, God.
So Maria quit her job and got another job at a factory.
This is stalker. This is what happens.
Yes. This way, she could work at the factory on Broadway. She could avoid him entirely. 4 days later, Cataldo found out where she was and was waiting for her outside.
Call the cops, bro.
Again, he promised to marry her. Maria said at this point, she, quote, I believed everything he said. Because she doesn't know what to do with this.
Why the fuck would you believe someone who's been stalking you?
Because think about stalking. Even today, oh, he's so mean to me. Oh, it's because he likes you. It's like he's paying attention to you. That's good. You can get married. That's your goal in life. Here's one. I don't think she's understanding. There's not like a stalking awareness group going on in the 1800s. I don't think she's understanding what's happening. She just knows that a man is paying her attention and says he wants to marry her. And she's trying to understand it.
This is very concerning behavior.
Yeah. The papers gloss over all of the drug and the soda, stating that she went to get soda with him and he tried to take her to a house where his friend lived. And that's all they report. So I went back. This is because I remember it from the first trial too. I was like, what is going on here? What aren't they saying? I was able to find in a library in New York some of the trial transcripts of the first trial. So her story hasn't changed I didn't have the second trial, but the stories are the same. She included all the details of changing her route, trying to not talk to him, of him being persistent. She even included a time where he wanted her to go to a house to meet a friend of his from Italy who was a woman. She went there. There was no woman. She refused to go in the house. She stayed out on the street. She saw another man in the house. Yeah. And she got scared and she went home. So you can see what's happening here, how he's stalking her, how he's really trying to pressure her. Yeah. Maria changes jobs. She talks about this in the trial, and she says, I wanted to get rid of that man. He always followed me. So the papers are not printing anything about this time. So what the papers would not print that Maria Barbella testified to the first time around was this. Cataldo walked around the neighborhood with Maria after waiting for her to get out of work. He then took her to a saloon to get a drink. He even suggested that they sit apart if she was too embarrassed to be seen with a man because she's single and she's very concerned about her appearances and morality. He gave Maria a drink. She took a sip, hated it, said it tasted funny. And he said, oh, I'll just mix it with soda water and it will taste better. You need to drink it.
Why? I don't need to drink shit.
She drank it. She drank about half of it.
Oh, no.
Very shortly after, Cataldo told her they had to hurry. And she followed him to a house that it was unclear to me whether it was attached to the bar or whether it was just right across the street, but it was very close. So you can see what he's setting up here. Maria said at this time, I do not know myself. I felt very disturbed physically, disturbed from that drink. This is another thing that it makes me mad because sometimes translation doesn't work perfectly.
Yeah, we know this.
Right? And so, like, because that's a weird way to say it.
Yeah.
You know what she means. Come
Yeah.
on. Maria said she was being led along and felt very sick, so she just kind of followed because she couldn't get it together. She didn't know what was happening to her. She wasn't in her right mind, as she said. They went into a house. A woman led them to a room, then left and shut the door behind her. Cataldo locked the door and threw her on the bed.
No.
I'm going to give a trigger warning. So, optional earmuffs for sexual assault. This is in Maria's own words. You probably want to hear it, Alana, just to get the full story, but I'll leave it up to you. This is what she said. So, everybody else, earmuff. In her own words, I was half stunned, so that I was hardly aware of what was going on. And he did a great many things with me. Then he did a great many things with me so that he caused me to bleed in my private parts. And he took from that blood with a handkerchief and in a joyous manner said, I see that you are a good girl. You shall be my spouse, my wife. So come back if you weren't. So this is what she described the first frickin' time. She was a virgin and he raped her in a room after drugging her.
Yeah.
And then the only thing that is happening here that's different is that she does not feel like she can report this as a crime because she now thinks she has to marry him.
Right.
Because of societal pressure. Maria said she was in that room for over 3 hours before he told her it was time to go. She refused to go, saying, I am not leaving this room until you married me because you dishonored me.
Mm-hmm.
Cataldo told her, we'll get married, but we first need to fix up an apartment. As they're leaving, Maria saw the woman who's running this, whatever this
Date
is.
rape house.
And she told that woman, I want to call the police. And the woman refused. And Cataldo says, you don't need to call the police. I'm going to marry you. So Maria does not know what to do. She is very sick the next day. He brings her home. She doesn't say anything to her parents, which of course the prosecution's all over. But she doesn't say anything to her parents because she's ashamed
she doesn't.
and scared. And she's sick.
Oh my God, I have
she's
so many
physically
things to
ill.
say.
So the next day she doesn't feel good. Whatever. I don't know what he gave her.
I mean, a date rape drug. I mean, what? I don't know what it's called.
I know. But I don't know what it is at that point. Like, I don't know what he put in there. So she's sick the next day. On Monday, Cataldo's like, okay, the house is ready. Come on. Maria goes to the building. Cataldo says he just needs to get the keys. Wait here. Maria gets tired of waiting and she goes up to the apartment that's supposed to be theirs that he's been getting ready this whole time, hence the delay. It's empty. Yep. She realizes he lied to her and she tries to leave. And she testified that he assaulted her again. So every day for a month, Maria asks Cataldo to marry her. And every day he says tomorrow until he says no. Cataldo also tried to do the brothel plan. It seemed that he had some men come and with that intention, and I don't think anything happened, but Maria didn't say. So he tells Maria, I'll give you 50 cents for every, the cut for every time that other women, because he's like, I know 3 other girls who I've done this to, and I'm going to bring them. And then we'll start a house, and then I'll give you 50 cents every time they do anything.
Jesus,
and she was like, no,
Christ.
This is disgusting. Absolutely not.
I'm so understanding of her.
And Maria says, listen, just marry me and I literally will leave your life. I will go home once I'm married and I'll live at home. I'll work all the time. I'll just sew and support myself. You can do whatever you want with whomever you want. I just need you to marry me so that I can go home. That was literally the argument she's making. She doesn't want anything to do with him. Yeah. She just wants to be able to go home and she doesn't feel like she can because she's now dishonored. So Maria's mother is like in on this, right? She's trying to help. She comes to talk to them as well because she wants Maria to come home too. Cataldo says, give me $200. What? I don't even understand. Maria says she never actually gave Cataldo any money. So that $400 from that they claimed at the beginning, she said that's not true. And she said he offered to give her money to go away, but she didn't want the money. What she wanted was her reputation intact.
Yeah.
He then said, I'll marry her for $200 because she needs a dress. She doesn't have anything to wear for the wedding. And
Who
they were like, what
cares?
are you talking about?
Get dressed in your house dress.
Yeah. So that is from the first trial. Completely skipped in the press. I'm going to assume that the second trial was pretty much telling this story again under the lens of this epileptic insanity plea that her lawyers are brilliantly trying to present as an out for the jury to be like, you see what's happening here, right? here's a way that you can avoid this. The defense brought in their own medical experts who testified that in their opinion, Maria was not able to tell right from wrong in that moment due to her condition. And their closing arguments, which started late because juror number 3 thought it was at 10:30. He didn't get the memo. He was just sitting in the hallway reading a paper. They were like, where's juror number 3, guys? He's like, I'm so sorry. He was a milkman. Maria's team doubled down on the epileptic, that's hard to say, epileptic evidence, but also made it seem as though Maria was overtaken by a power greater than herself to get rid of an evil man. Her lawyer said, the power behind the hand that wielded it was a power above and beyond the possessor of that hand. A power you cannot call to account, cannot condemn. A power that controls each of us. Which is really a brilliant strategy. He's basically saying, like, listen,
God's revenge.
I've given you everything. I've painted a picture of the brutality this woman faced. I've also given you an out that she did not know what she was doing. And now I'm telling you that this man was so evil, God had her do it. I'm checking all the boxes.
Preach.
The prosecution basically was like, she murdered a man and murder's illegal. So we can't change the law even if all these things happened. On December 10th, the jury came back with the verdict of not guilty. The Chicago Tribune wrote a scathing article about the appeal.
God.
Yeah. Quote, formally, the jury decided Maria Barberi is an epileptic and was unconscious of her act. Actually, they decided that Cataldo was well served by being killed, and the girl herself had suffered enough for it. The judge, of course, told them, meaning the jury, under the law, they could not consider whether Cataldo was the greatest benefactor or the worst fiend the world had ever saw. But the jury was not of the stuff that could bear to apply the law to the stupid, helpless, dumbly appealing? I don't even know what that means. I'm dumb. Dumbly appealing girl.
Wow.
But get off. Stop it. Ugh. They go on to say, had it been anybody but the wood-faced automaton who blushed beneath her red-rimmed eyes and looked about with the timid sadness of dire ignorance, the strain would have been intense. But Maria Barberi is so commonplace herself, she makes everything she is a part of seem commonplace. Winning her life away from justice was like winning a civil suit.
What an asshole.
What is your problem? Were you Cataldo's brother? Get over yourself. And this is all over. The Brooklyn Daily Edges know better. They write, the shrieking sisterhood will see in all this a triumph for their sex against the tyrant man.
Yeah.
Okay. Shrieking sisterhood is an amazing phrase, though, and I'd like to have a group called that. Yuck. The articles do have one fair question. They're like, hey, if you truly believe that Maria was controlled by the epileptic fit at the time of the murder, why would we let her out? Because wouldn't she just do it again?
They didn't really mean that.
I know, but they're asking, that's what they're standing on. And it does make sense. They're like, hey, should we be worried that she does this again? But I'm telling you before, the lawyers are basically like, here's your out, but we all know what happened here. And we just don't have a way for us to, we don't have the right legal arguments in place yet and the right laws, but here's your way out to save a woman who was brutalized. The Times painted a more sympathetic picture of Maria. You know, the others are saying she has no emotion, lack of intelligence, lack of class. The Times quoted her as saying, these are her own words, "This is the last day, and nobody knows how I feel. I am so sick, so tired, so troubled. I wish it was all over. I want to go home to my family and spend Christmas with my mama." She does have feelings, guys. This is how she's feeling. I get so sick of people ripping apart. Oh, they can't possibly know what it's like. After her acquittal, Maria planned to go directly home to her parents, which is all she'd ever wanted from the day that she was drugged and brought to that room. She said she was going to spend a few days in the country with her family and then enjoy Christmas and then start looking for work. Now, after the trial, I wish I could say that Maria went on to have the most amazing life and with a renewed sense of hope, but there's not a ton about her. She was freed. She was not executed, which is a huge win. After the trial, there's a brief excerpt on the 18th saying that Maria is lost, and they are ripping her apart for it like she's ruining her family again. The mother says that an attractive woman came to the house and Maria left with her and they don't know where she is. And her mother says she's afraid Maria doesn't know the address and might be wandering the streets.
What?
I know, which seems like a weird thing to say too. That makes me wonder, did Maria have trouble? Like, I mean, I'm sure they moved since prison, but
Interesting.
I assume she was found because on the 31st, there's another record of Maria being a hero.
Hmm?
Her upstairs neighbor, Mrs. Hogan, was lighting the lamps for the night and her dress caught on fire. And she was screaming and running to the balcony. Maria saw her, and so did a bunch of people, but Maria took a bunch of blankets, ran upstairs, and very
Covered her.
quickly started beating the fire out, even
Wow.
using her own hands and hurting herself in the process, and saved the woman's life.
Wow. That's awesome.
I know, right? So now she's a heroine. It's just all over. Maria is not in the papers again until 1897 when she visits Mrs. Knack, who's probably a woman we'll cover. She was accused of murder, and Maria said, I'm going to visit her because I'm basically the only person who knows what she's going through.
Yeah.
And she wanted to offer her some comfort.
Wow.
November of that same year, Maria was married. I was really hoping it was a joyous occasion, and I hate that I kept digging. The New York Times said the courtship lasted for 24 hours. And then Maria was married to Francisco Paolo Bruno, who was a barber, ironically.
God.
Her lawyer, Mr. Friend, gave her away, and her brother was the best man. Of the wedding, Maria said, my mother knew Mr. Bruno's family in Italy. I never saw him until Tuesday, and I did not want to marry him. I waited until 12 o'clock, and then my mother said I must marry him. I wanted to wait a year, but my mother would not let me.
But maybe they learn to love each other.
I know. I know, but it's just.
I know,
and her mother's trying to do what's right for the 1800s.
She is,
She's like, you're not going to get a lot of suitors now because you killed the first guy, and everybody knows what happened because it's a public trial.
Yeah.
So we need to make moves here, and he's agreeing to marry you. But I have I don't know if he was a nice man. I don't know if he was 75 years old.
Was he stout?
Was he stout? Did he have a good temperament? These are all the things we're missing. I thought it was pretty ballsy that she killed her first guy with a razor, and he is a barber. That makes me nervous. I scoured the papers for any mentions of Maria after that, maybe not awesome wedding. And in 1902, Mrs. Foster, if you remember, the prison matron who sat with her and was just like her bud.
Yeah.
I mean, kept her.
Maybe she taught her English.
Probably. Anytime she got upset, they would look to Mrs. Foster like, can you help? And she would help bring her back. She died in the Park Avenue hotel fire, which 20 people died and 50 were injured. And Maria heard that Mrs. Foster might have passed away, and she ran to the jail to confirm it was true and started to sob once she knew that it was. The attendant at the prison said they hardly recognized Maria because she was dressed very poorly, they said, like in very thin clothes and looked like she was on hard times. But she still gave 25 cents to the attendant and said, would you please put a flower on her casket for me? I know, right?
Wow.
I could find no mention of Maria after that.
Jeez. Poor Maria. I totally understand what she did.
Right? It's
totally
so different than Martha's
Not even
case.
hesitation. Fuck that guy.
So different in Martha's case. And you can understand now, looking back and finding that after the fact, I totally understand Mary Livermore's quote too. She's like, what are you guys being weird about?
Yeah.
This is ridiculous. There weren't laws in place to properly take care of Cataldo in that moment. If Maria had gone to the police after she was raped, like what would have happened? Probably nothing. She would have been dragged through the mud.
Yep.
And that would have been it, which is honestly still happens a lot today. And if she had gone in the very beginning to be like, hey, this guy is following me home from work and I've had to quit my job, they would have just been like, yeah, he likes you. What's your problem? You should be so lucky. That's a man pays attention to you.
Yeah. So bad.
There isn't a proper avenue for her to explore. And she saw that as her only option. She's like, he either marries me or I kill him. That's it. Those are my only two choices.
Yep.
And he wouldn't marry her. So, I mean, obviously murder is bad. But again, we have to look at the reasons why people do things to make sure that the laws give them choices that are reasonable.
Yeah.
And she lived, I would say for a month, she lived being brutalized. And before that, I would say she probably lived in some discomfort and probably convinced herself that she liked him. And then it's that confusing thing, right? Because when you date somebody and then they become a stalker, it's confusing because you liked them at one point. And then they become a stalker and now you're scared of them. And it's that same things she was probably dealing with. Probably parts of her were like, maybe I do like him.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he just really likes me and that's nice to have attention. And then
Yeah.
other parts of her were like, why does he know where I work now? What's
Yeah.
happening? So I think what the jury did, those stout men were like, listen, we're stout.
Yeah.
We have good manners and good intent, and we don't think this woman should die because of what she survived.
Yeah.
And if we have to pretend that she has epilepsy and can't remember doing it, then I'm okay with that. That's what I feel like they all did.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like it. I was surprised that they gave that verdict. Thank
And so
God.
this actually happened before Martha Place. So she was
Okay.
already acquitted before this happened, and that was the only other case. So
Yeah.
that and Lizzie. So Martha probably went in thinking, oh, there's a good chance I'm going to
Right.
get out. But it was
Right.
just such a different dynamic.
Oh,
Martha
completely.
was the one who was brutalizing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And Lizzie was like, Lizzie, everybody can just look at her
Yeah.
and be like, she's not well.
No.
Right. And this one with Maria, you can see like, hey, this woman is struggling.
Yeah, it's totally fucked.
Martha, what were you doing?
So
And you killed a child.
Right. I mean,
just you can see the differences.
Yeah, it's so different.
But it's weird to think like, yeah, justice got it right, but justice did have to kind of walk some gray lines.
Yeah, they had to take some paths that were not.
Yeah, they had to blaze their own trail there for a minute.
Yeah, for sure.
But what are your last words?
I don't know how to put this, but a trial with your own peers is really important. And I know we've fixed it since then because men, unless they've had a certain circumstance happen to them, men really don't understand how it feels. I don't know how to put this. Like, men might not understand the harm in like catcalling a woman. And like, it could be like, oh yeah, it's just like attention. Like,
Yeah.
Somebody could say like, oh, I got catcalled by some guys. Like a guy could say that. I think it's hard for men to understand like the threat of violence underneath it.
Underneath everything. Yeah. You
Exactly.
have to assess as a woman, like, is this man just being a weirdo? Is this man unsafe?
Right.
And you have to do it in an instant.
Yes.
All the time.
And like, we're trained to do that by this point, but like, they're not going to understand that. And they're not going to understand the stalking part. They're not going to understand like all of the awfulness around the sexual assault. Like, men can really easily talk about sexual assault because they don't understand. It's just, that's why, I mean, trial of your own peers is so important. Yeah. Because that's completely going over their head. Like, that nuance is so fucking big here. And
I'm telling you, Livermore is just spot on.
Yeah.
I love that she was like, nope, I stand by what I said.
I'm with her.
Bye. The same thing goes for race, too. For the longest time, it was just 12 white men. And you couldn't possibly begin to understand as man or woman if
what
they were not white.
Yeah.
You can't understand that aspect of it either.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, I was relieved that this was the outcome. Even though
I was shocked.
Blatantly killed him. I mean, there's nobody's questioning that. Like, you did it. And I just feel like she's not a threat to society. She was trying to escape the situation that was presented to her.
Yeah, it's very clear.
I would have been okay if they gave her manslaughter too.
Sure.
But, they went all in. They're stout. They couldn't help it. So who should listen?
Judges, jury members, lawyers, police, parents, take care of your people, and also like make sure that
they can come home no matter what.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, communicate to your children that be open enough so that they can tell you like these awful things that they may be ashamed of, but you could potentially save their life, save like them from trauma, that kind of thing. So,
yeah, I mean, think about, I know this, I'm not blaming the Barbellas at all, but if they had the different mindset of you can come home no matter what, whenever you need to, nobody would have known what had happened to her, and they just could have kept it a family secret, and she could have come home and avoided him potentially. But they were trying to do what was best for their daughter.
I know. The societal pressure doesn't help either.
It does not at all. Yikes. All right, yeah, I just thought this one was so fascinating because
Yeah.
I was like, Maria Barbella, who's that? Let me look real quick. And as I was
You
reading,
just
I'm
fell
like,
in
this
a
is
rabbit hole.
very different than Martha.
Yeah,
Martha scares the
completely
crap out of
different.
me.
Yeah, completely different.
And I don't
You
want to
could
be
just
anywhere
tell.
near her. But Maria, I feel such empathy for, and there's a whole lot of gray area here.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed that riveting story. We will take a couple weeks off, but we'll be bopping around on the socials, I assume. And I'll have a lot of updates when I come home, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure.
When I come home. When I come home.
You are going to come home.
Yeah. When I go to my new home. All right. Well, you can find us on all the platforms at
Tea Time Crimes.
You can email us at
teatimecrimes@gmail.com.
And rate, review, like, subscribe, send us recommendations for teas and crimes. And thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye. You're gonna miss us.